I don't even have my apron on. While I'm making last week's broth, I'm going to prep a few ingredients for my chicken tortilla soup. For these, I'm going to want some char on them. It's going to add a lot of flavor to the soup, and if I was cooking with a gas range, I would take these s'more sticks and just roast up all my ingredients, but I'm not. I'm working with electric. So what we're going to do is we're going to put them in a dry cast iron skillet. If you can't get it quite dry, sometimes I get a little water on some steel wool and I'll go around. If you're going to do that, you need to make sure to cook on it immediately, and after you're done, put some oil down so it doesn't rust. I want a medium heat on this cast iron skillet, and this garlic is just going in as one entire bulb. While that's getting a head start, I'm going to go ahead and de-seed my peppers. I'm using 1 dried guajillo chili and 2 dried ancho. These are going to give my soup a lot of flavor, a lot of body, and a little bit of smokiness. And I don't need all the seeds out, just enough to be able to claim that I did it, because I like these to stay as whole as I can get them. I want these tomatoes to stay pretty whole, so I'm just going to twist them gently to take this stem off. You can use canned tomatoes if you want to, but I think you're not going to get the flavor, this kind of flavor, anywhere else. And of course, if you're making this in the winter time and tomatoes are out of season, then I would much rather use a quality canned tomato. If you're going to do that, one mark of quality, which usually is a very comparable price to the diced or smashed or sauced tomatoes, are whole tomatoes, whole canned tomatoes. And that's a mark of quality because when they're whole, you can't hide very many imperfections. If you had a bad crop, if you had a lot of insects that year, you could just cut them up and throw away the little pieces that don't look good. But whole tomatoes, definitely a mark of quality when you're using canned. Just gonna go right in half with that onion. I'm gonna try to get that one side really nice and charred, but I want to leave both my stem and my root intact. So then in with your onions, whole tomatoes, and if you have a fan, use it for this part, because the chilies might get a little bit smoky. As soon as I turn that off, I'm going to do my best to get some of this charred goodness over here on my cutting board. And after that, I'm going to hit the pan with some oil. Let that oil soak back into that cast iron. So right now it's very open, so this is the time to do it. Now that we have all this beautiful char on our vegetables, it's time to get them into a blender. And the onions and tomatoes and the chiles can just go in as is. I got this whole thing nice and charred, but we're going to discard that skin, and it's just like we roasted it in the oven, except now it has more char flavor. Right? So that's going in. I've got about 2 liters or half a gallon of that chicken broth that we made last week. Most of that's going in here. Medium high. The rest of it, we need some liquid to blend with. Now, if you'll remember, I put some oregano into the broth. I want a little bit more actually ground up in there. And actually, if we're just blending it, I can go ahead and throw the whole stem in. Before we add anything, I just want to take a little taste of this and see, because if it needs heat, this is where to add it. If it needs more oregano, this is where to add it. If it needs salt, we can add it later. That is really nice. What makes a tortilla soup is a tortilla. And that is used to thicken our soup. So I'm gonna do one at a time. I went for 2 corn tortillas for what's going to be roughly a half a gallon of soup. If you want to do more, you're going to make it thicker. If you want to do less, it's going to be a little more runny. Then I reserved a little bit of this broth to clean out this blender. Because that's all flavor in there. We don't have to be quite as delicate with this as we were with that chicken. We can bring it up to temperature right away, but then I do want to hold it around that 180 to 200 mark, because we're going to let it simmer, we're going to let these flavors marry, and they will develop as they spend more time in here. We got them on the cast iron to get that char in there. That was one flavor. And now we're just going to let them all relax and settle together. It's been about 10 minutes on a medium-high heat, and we're at that point where I want it to be between 180 and 200, around 90 Celsius. So I'm going to take the lid off and turn this down about 25% of the way up, and I'm just going to let this simmer. I'll come by once every 15-20 minutes. I'll taste it, and when I like it, soup's on. I have the luxury of letting this simmer for a couple hours. You don't really need to. Try to go at least an hour. and it's only going to improve with time, but those flavors need a chance to marry. About an hour ago, I decided it needed some acidity, so I popped in some sherry vinegar. You can use regular white vinegar if you want, apple cider vinegar. I could use the Spanish wine vinegar that I made in the vinegar episode. You could also use a lemon if you'd like. Tortilla soup usually comes with some tortilla strips on top. I don't like to do that. I like to fry my tortilla whole and then sort of break it up like chips. And here's how to do that. Just barely quarter inch of oil. Get it really hot. And once those edges start to turn brown, you can flip it. 45 seconds, a minute. Push down any air bubbles that come up through the tortilla. Get it done to the point that you like it. Get it out to drain on some paper towels. Hit it with a little salt. And we're ready to plate. I'm going to start with some of that pulled chicken that we made last week. And I'll just throw however much I want on the bottom of my bowl right there. Over top with our tortilla soup that's been simmering for hours. Tortilla chips on top, and I'll garnish with a little cilantro. This is cotija cheese. It's a crumbly, sort of salty Mexican cheese. I didn't have any Mexican crema, but you can do well by squeezing half a lime into some sour cream with a little salt. Does the trick. Chicken tortilla soup. Oh man. The soup itself is just so savory. There's a lot of flavors going on there. The char that we spent so long trying to get definitely comes out in the most wonderful way. The cotija cheese is a little bit of a textural treat, adds much needed saltiness. I purposely didn't salt this very much because I knew I was using this cheese. And this sour cream with the lime really rounds it out. The acid from that sherry vinegar that I added before really goes well with the fattiness of that sour cream. That's nice. And tortilla's nice and crispy. This is great. Alright guys, get in the kitchen and make yourself something awesome. This was a little bit of work, but so worth it.